Folks, I'm pleased to announce Derek Gilbert on Nino's Corner.tv. I've been trying to get this guy on for a little bit, and finally got him on. He's an author of 4 books, the last one being The Second Coming of Saturn by Derek P. Gilbert. This is basically the occult religion, and he's going to help us, me, and my audience understand more of what the occult religion really is and where it all started, where it all sprung up from, and then how we're in this mess we're in today. Welcome, Derek. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping this makes YouTube. It's hard because they censor me, and I don't want to get another strike. So, but I think this should be able to make it.
Very familiar with that.
Yeah, they're censoring everybody. They don't want the truth to come out. You were just going over a little bit with me earlier, but I want to read just one paragraph to the audience so they can get a grip on what we're talking about here. A new age began December 21st, 2020, the Great Conjunction, a meeting in the sky of the planets Jupiter and Saturn, heralded the age of Aquarius, a new golden age ruled by Saturn. The old god once reigned over a world of peace and plenty. So the old god who once reigned over a world of peace and plenty. So let's just take it from there. And then right after that paragraph, it says it's a lie. So you want to take it from there?
This is the god that the Romans called Saturn. But in looking at the religions of the ancient world, my wife and I have been doing this now for about the last 6 years since we came to the Ozarks here and partnered with Skywatch TV, which is a Christian media ministry. Tom Horn is our CEO, and he's been writing about stuff like this for quite a while. Things like Zenith 2016, Apollyon Rising 2012, Zeitgeist 2025. Not all of his books have a year title in them, but he's been looking at this kind of research for a long time. And so he saw what we were digging into, and he's made it possible for us to spend full time on this. So the last couple of books I co-authored with my wife, Sharon K. Gilbert. Veneration, which looked at the cult of the dead around ancient Israel. The fact they were worshiping what they thought were the dead, but who the early Christian church understood were actually the demonic spirits of the giants who were destroyed in the flood of Noah. That was the default understanding of the early church.
Wow.
Until about first 400 years after the crucifixion, they understood. Where did demons come from? Oh, those were the giants that were talked about in Genesis chapter 6.
Are those all demons?
Yeah.
All demons come from the demonic presence of the giants?
That's the understanding of the early church. This is according to the book of Enoch, the book of First Enoch, and the first 32 chapters or so, which is called the Book of the Watchers. And that was the understanding of the apostles. So the apostles, the early church, whenever you read their writings, number one, they understood that the pagan gods of Greece and Rome, like Zeus or Jupiter, Apollo, Athena, Hera, they were real entities, but they were fallen angels. Second, that demons were the spirits of the giants, the Nephilim described in Genesis chapter 6, who were later called Rephaim. And as we started digging into our research for the book Veneration, which is out 2 years ago, we found that these Rephaim that are just mentioned a couple of times in like the book of Deuteronomy, Og of Bashan, the last of the remnant of the Rephaim. Turns out the pagan neighbors of ancient Israel not only knew who the Rephaim were, they worshiped them. And Israel was drawn into this worship too. It was a whole thing. I mean,
but aren't they still worshipped today? I mean, powerful people across the planet and involved in our government, Hollywood, everything. Their occult practices. I mean, it's still very much well received and worshipped today. I mean, I've heard they've gone to rituals in Antarctica, different places, Bohemian Grove, stuff like this. Isn't this all the same thing?
Yeah, and we can all trace it back. We could trace it all back to ancient Mesopotamia. That was the thing. The other thing that really startled us as we were digging into these ancient religions, just trying to figure out what was the worldview of the apostles and the prophets, the Hebrew prophets. What did they know about what their neighbors believed? And we were just curious, what did they know, and how is it in the Bible? How did it affect the writing of the Bible? And we began to find that as you understood what the pagans around ancient Israel believed, a lot of weird stuff in the Bible starts suddenly making sense. Like, why did God part the Red Sea? There's an answer for that. Why did God tell them to do strange things like burn the livers of the sacrificial animals? Those were used for fortune telling, essentially, by the pagans. So there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that you just look, you think, okay,
that makes no sense, but you're saying it actually makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense if you understand what the pagans around ancient Israel believed. And there's this consistent theme of like the third day. I mean, as a Christian, you understand that Jesus rose again at dawn of the third day. The Rephaim, the spirits of the Nephilim, there are texts that were found from ancient Syria. The Amorite kingdom called Ugarit, which is in northern Syria, actually worshipped the Rephaim. And there were these texts found about 100 years ago, but only translated about 40 years ago. So this is we're like the first generation of access to this information. One of these Rephaim texts describes them as chariot warriors, and they're summoned to a sacrificial meal held in their honor on the summit of Mount Hermon, which is where this rebellion in Genesis 6 is supposed to have taken place. Mount Hermon is the tallest mountain anywhere around Israel. It's right the northern border of Israel and Syria and Lebanon, 9,200 feet. And this is where the Canaanite creator god named El held court with his 70 sons who represented the gods of all the nations. Well, the Rephaim were summoned to this ritual meal in their honor where they would mount their chariots and they would travel one day and then another and then arrive at dawn of the third day. Now, this text was written 1,200 years before the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. But when you read the life of Jesus, you see that before he went to Jerusalem the final time to be sacrificed as our redemptive sacrifice to buy us back from these fallen angels, he ascended Mount Hermon. He was at Caesarea Philippi, which is at the foot of Mount Hermon. And that's where he said to Peter, he asked him that question, who do you say that I am? And Peter said, well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. Well, guess what? He's standing at the foot of a 9,200-foot mountain that was supposed to be the home of the pagan gods of the Canaanites.
So it was a way of taking that back.
Exactly. And then he climbed the mountain with Peter and James and John, and he was transfigured into a being of light. Moses and Elijah appear. Jesus was sending a flare into the spirit realm saying, here I am, come get some. And then he goes to Jerusalem and he's sacrificed there. And, and
that would be why the occult hate Jesus Christ so much.
Yes. Yes. And then at dawn of the third day, he rises up just in reversing this ancient ritual that the spirits of these giants, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, thought that they would trick their or con their followers into doing for them.
So he did. He reversed the spell that they had on humanity, the control of humanity.
Exactly.
Jesus, wow, that's just incredible.
And you see this over and over again in the Bible. That's why I love this research. Why did the Israelites march around Jericho in a circle? There's an answer for that. There was an ancient ritual involving circumambulating, ritual circling of the fields that goes back 1,000 years before the Exodus. And it was a city of the moon god in ancient in southeast Iraq. Jericho just happens to be named for the Amorite name of the moon god. So this happens over and over again in the Bible. So as we were pulling on these threads, that's where this came in. Saturn, who I identify as the leader or the chief of the Watchers, the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, called 𝗫𝗄𝗄 in the book of Enoch. And then I go through and identify all of his other identities all through history.
And so right now we are being ruled by the planet Saturn. Am I right in saying that? Or
that is what the occultists and New Agers believe. They were looking for the return of a golden age. And this was something that was written by a Roman poet around 40 BC, 40 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, right after the assassination of Julius Caesar. He wrote that now there'll be a new golden age. He was trying to suck up to Octavian, who became Caesar Augustus. I guess when you're a poet in ancient Rome, you need a wealthy sponsor to pay your bills. So he wrote this poem called the Fourth Eclogue. And in that, he wrote, justice returns old Saturn's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Now, he was referring back to this idea, the ages of man, which comes from a Greek poet named Hesiod, who wrote a lot of what we know about Greek mythology. There was a golden age when Kronos, another name for Saturn, ruled in heaven. And this was the pre-flood era. Then there was a silver age where things weren't quite as good, a bronze age where things got real violent and bloody. And then the current iron age is the one that we live in now. And but they were looking for a return to the golden age when things would be great and life would be wonderful and easy. Well, that great conjunction on the winter solstice of 2020, where Jupiter and Saturn met in the sky, the closest observable conjunction of those two planets in 800 years. They met at 0 degrees of the constellation Aquarius. Why is that relevant? Because Aquarius, that means we're now fully into the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius, according to astrologers, is ruled by the planet Saturn. So they believe this is a new age where things will be less materialistic and more decentralized. And now you and I know that our fortunes are not governed by the movement of the planets in the
100%.
sky. But there are a lot of people out there who do, and a lot of them are very wealthy and powerful. I mean, we all remember Nancy Reagan used to set Ronald Reagan's calendar when he was president based on his daily horoscope. So this is not, this shouldn't surprise us, but there are people who believe that this is essentially the signal that we're entering a new golden age, the great reset that's being pushed by the globalists at the World Economic Forum.
But also, in a sense, the Great Awakening. That's the way I see it. That's the golden age for me. That's how I interpret it. Is actually, the joke is on them, is how I see it, because this is the Great Awakening, and I feel like, we are in. I had no idea we were even in the age of Aquarius right now. So we are legitimately now in the age of Aquarius.
Right, and again, Aquarius, the sign, is supposed to be ruled by Saturn, and that's a signal that Jupiter, who had taken over as the king of the pantheon, and this is the way the story goes, and this is a pattern that's repeated over and over in the ancient world: Rome, Greece, Canaan, Babylon, Sumer, Mesopotamia, even northern Mesopotamia, the civilizations of the Hurrians and the Hittites, ancient people who basically faded from history before the birth of Jesus. They had a story where there was an older, like a sky god, who was overthrown by his son, who in some of the stories castrated him. That was the Greek myth of Kronos castrating Uranus. And then he in turn was replaced by his son, the storm god. Jupiter in Rome, Zeus in Greece, Baal in Canaan, Marduk in Babylon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason the pattern is the same is because it's a memory of the same story transmitted from culture to culture, but it goes back to ancient Mesopotamia. And this entity, Saturn, Kronos, the Phoenicians called him Baal, Hammon, the Philistines called him Dagon, same entity, different names. He was cast down to Tartarus. And in fact, that's even mentioned in the Bible. 2 Peter 2, verse 4, Peter writes that God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell. But the word in Greek is Tartarosus. That's Tartarus. That's a different place from Hades, which is where the run-of-the-mill dead went. Tartarus was, to the Greeks, they believed it was as far below Hades as the earth is below heaven. That was a special place reserved for supernatural rebels. And Peter, under the influence of the Holy Spirit, wrote that there were angels in Tartarus. Well, the only sinning angels that we know of, and when you read 2 Peter 2 carefully, and also Jude mentions the same event, it's clear that it was a sexual sin. And the only place in the Bible where that's mentioned is Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, where the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were fair and took wives of any they chose, and from them came the giants, the men of renown, the mighty men who were of old, the Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
Yeah. So this entity, the leader of that rebellion, according to the book of Enoch, is chained up in Tartarus, according to Enoch. So we equate the two, and by identifying him as the leader of this group, Saturn, Kronos, Baal, Hammon, etc., we read in Revelation chapter 9 that these entities get out. And there is one who is identified as the king of those in the pit, called Apollyon or Abaddon, which means the destroyer. And in the book, I show more evidence just than this chain of logic that I spun out here. There's a connection to the Mount of Olives that's really, really surprising. And it explains why Jesus spent the better part of the last week of his life when he wasn't in the temple on the Temple Mount. He was on the Mount of Olives. And according to prophecy, when he comes back, it will be on the Mount of Olives. And I think that's why it's connected to this entity.
I often tell my audience, and I speak about this, and I say, the globalists have been at this for years, if not decades, if not centuries, but really, they've been waiting for this time in human history. According to the stars, they've been waiting for this for thousands of years to rush in this new world order, right? I mean, this has been thousands of years of waiting for this time.
This is a return to Babel. I mean, Nimrod tried to establish a global kingdom in the post-flood era. And in fact, this even tracks with archaeology, which is really what's amazing. When you look at the archaeological record and compare it against the flow of history, it matches up. There's a period between about 3800 BC and about 3100 BC, where the city that's identified in the Bible as the center of Nimrod's kingdom, Uruk, dominated Mesopotamia. They had outposts in Turkey where they were basically trading, but dominating the locals. Basically, you're going to give us your timber and your copper so we can make weapons, or else. And then at 3100 BC, for some reason, that empire just collapsed all at once. And the site that's identified as the Tower of Babel at the ancient Mesopotamian city, Sumerian city of Eridu. Likewise, they were in the process of building the biggest ziggurat, which is a step pyramid from Mesopotamia. The biggest one in all of Mesopotamia was never finished. An archaeologist who dug at this site back in 1949 said it coincides with the end of this Uruk period of history. Well, gee, what could that have been?
Aren't they building the Temple of Babel again? Haven't they resurrected it and rebuilt it?
They've rebuilt other ziggurats in Iraq. Saddam Hussein rebuilt the temple of the moon god at the city of and there are some other buildings out there that looks like some of the Middle Age paintings of the Tower of Babel. In fact, there's one that was just announced for Tel Aviv. They're going to build one that looks like one of those medieval paintings of the Tower of Babel.
So this is all in preparation for the time we're living in now. That's why they were building these temples. That's why they're reconstructing them, right?
I think you're right, and I think this is what globalists are looking to do. They want to bring us back under a one world government. The World Economic Forum was hoping to use the pandemic for that. When the fear over this fades.
Be careful with the words you say on that.
I understand.
Put this on, yeah.
I understand, but they're going to move to global warming after this.
Climate change. They're going to make that the new hysteria.
But the thing that's really struck me about this is I was researching the book, and I should have made a bigger deal of this in the book. I did include this. There was a Roman historian in the 2nd century AD who was describing the festival called the Saturnalia, which was the most popular festival in ancient Rome. And it was devoted to this old god, Saturn, Kronos, 𝗀, Apollyon, the destroyer. And it reads like the justification for the Great Reset. He wrote this: the first inhabitants of Italy were the Aborigines, whose king Saturnus, or Saturn, is said to have been a man of such extraordinary justice that no one was a slave in his reign or had any private property, but all things were common to all and undivided as one estate for the use of everyone, in memory of which way of life it has been ordered that at the Saturnalia slaves should everywhere sit down with their masters at the entertainments, the rank of all being made equal. That sounds just like the Great Reset.
It's exactly the Great Reset. Exactly, to the T.
Yeah. This is the return of old Saturn's reign. What they want is to bring back this golden age where we will own nothing and we'll all be happy.
Right. And that's, to me, like watching this play out, they're getting a lot of pushback, Does this also coincide with Revelations, the apocalypse in the Bible?
It does, and my wife and I have we produce a weekly video series, a weekly program called Unraveling Revelation, which is broadcast on a Christian television network, and it's got its own channel, unravelingrevelation.tv. And we're like 120 episodes in, and we're only halfway through the book of Revelation.
Wow.
But we believe.
Are we living in Revelations right now?
Yeah, and I think we've been for the last 2,000 years. Actually, we look at the seals that are opened on the scroll, that are opened by the Lamb who was slain. Jesus, when he appears in heaven, begins opening the seals on this scroll. Well, he arrived in heaven in the 1st century after the resurrection. I mean, in the book of Acts, we see a couple of the apostles, like Stephen, when he's being stoned, looks up and he sees Jesus at the right hand of God. So, okay, by the year 35, he was starting to open these seals. We argue that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have been riding since the 1st century. We made that case in our book, Giants, Gods, and Dragons. We're waiting on the 6th seal, which is the one where there's a massive earthquake, the likes of which the earth has never seen. And we believe that coincides with the church being, pulled out of here. We could be wrong about that. We're not going to be, we're not going to argue with folks over the timing. That's how we interpret things. But the point is that these 4 horsemen, who we identify as literal entities, by the way, Apollo and Hermes and Ares, of course, the god of war, and then the god of death, Thanatos, was already named in the book of Revelation. They have, as we look at human history for the last couple thousand years, there've been a lot of things that are really, really awful. We've not seen that kind of an earthquake, though, that coincides with the opening of the 6th seal. A friend of ours by the name of David W. Lowe wrote a book about 15, 16 years ago called Earthquake Resurrection. And he argued, based on the evidence from the Shroud of Turin, which was presumably the evidence from the energy released by Jesus when he was resurrected, that the resurrection of literally billions of Christians at once would be the energy released to cause this massive earthquake.
Oh, wow.
It's a fascinating theory. And David is an accountant by trade, so he's very careful in how he assembled his evidence. He makes a really convincing case.
So, like the Nephilim, in the last days, it is said that they will walk the earth again, right? They're going to be coming back. Where have they been hiding? Are they on another planet? What is going on with that? Where are they? And are they going to be making a return?
Well, that's something where Sharon and I are a little different from some of the other folks who believe that the Nephilim literally walked the earth at some point in human history. If, as the early church believed, the Nephilim, their spirits destroyed of these giants destroyed in the flood, are demons that are still afflicting the earth today, they never left. They're still here. But there's a really interesting bit of evidence in the book of Ezekiel.
They just play for the NBA now.
The spirits of these things need to inhabit human bodies in order to interact with us.
So possession.
And in Ezekiel 39, as he's describing the end of the war of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 39, verse 11, God writes he's going to prepare a place for burial in Israel for Gog and his hordes. And it's the valley of the travelers east of the sea. And the key there is that the word traveler is known to the pagans of around ancient Israel. That was a term that was literally applied to the Rephaim spirits because they traveled or crossed over from one realm to another, the land of the dead to the land of the living. And in fact,
wow.
Mount Nebo, where Moses got his only look at the promised land across from Jericho. My wife and I've been there twice now, and we plan to go back in 2023. That in the book of Deuteronomy is called this mountain of Avarim, Abarim. In Hebrew, that means travelers. This mountain of the demons. That's where Moses got his one look at the promised land. That's where God says the battle of Gog and Magog is going to end. And we explained in our book why we believe Gog, Magog, that war is the war that leads to Armageddon, which will be fought at Jerusalem, not at Megiddo.
And that great war is on the horizon.
Yes. And that war will be fought by a demonically possessed army coming to Jerusalem.
Democrats? just saying. So this is coming down the horizon. How long it feels to me like there's a quickening happening, like space and time everything's happening so much faster. Are you thinking this is going to be in another 100 years, another 200 years, or do you think this is we're in the culmination of it right now?
I don't think we'll make it another 100 years. I don't want to set dates, but I don't think we make it that far. We just look at the way things have changed, even since 2012. Even since 2012, when politicians on one side of the spectrum were saying, okay, well, we support traditional marriage and so forth, who within 4 years had suddenly flipped their position. And now you can't even express a contrary position, or you get deplatformed, or if professors lose tenure or get fired. Things are happening so quickly that it's hard to imagine that even 20 years ago that we would be where we are right now.
And then I think about the younger generations, like how are they going to have a fighting chance? Because they're being brainwashed in these indoctrination camps, which I call the school system, even the church, all of it. They're all being brainwashed. Mainstream media. We're being hit on every side. We're at full war right now, and it's an information war, psychological war, and we're in it right now. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, again, that surprised us as we learned more about the religions of ancient Mesopotamia is that these things that we're seeing happening in America today that are just startling in terms of our definitions of what is a man and what is a woman. When you go back to the pre-Mosaic era, when you go back 3,500 years, we're actually returning to the way the Mesopotamians were living in the days of Moses, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The goddess Inanna, who was the goddess of sex and war in ancient Mesopotamia, she was praised for being able to change men into women and women into men. And sometimes she was a man, sometimes she was a woman, depending on her mood that day.
Would that go along the lines of Baphomet?
Same sort of thing. Androgyny was probably a thing because these fallen angels, as Jesus said in like the angels in heaven, they neither marry nor give in marriage. So I suspect they can manifest in our realm any way they choose in order to appeal to us and draw us into their following them. As Paul wrote, even Satan can appear as an angel of light. But yeah, this practice of breaking down gender barriers, that's a very old thing. Inanna is one of the oldest entities in Mesopotamia. They've got their texts praising her as far back as 3000 BC. And to this day, like Saturn, 𝗁𝗁 𝗵𝗲, same entity by different names. She's gone by many different names throughout history too. Ishtar, Astarte in the Bible, Aphrodite in Greece, Venus in Rome, and to some Christians, she's referred to as the Queen of Heaven. And that's not me making this up. This is peer-reviewed secular scholars who said, yeah, this veneration of this ancient entity has entered into some Christian practice today.
Today's day and age, everything is so confusing. What's right is left, what's up is down. It's like everyone's just confused walking around. Like no one can really believe what's happened to our reality. But it all makes sense if you follow the occult religion, what they're ushering forward, what they're bringing in. It is the second coming of Saturn. And basically what they're doing is after the Great Conjunction, this is the new heralded age. This is the new age ruled by Saturn and Aquarius. This is it. That's why everything is so upside down from what we were used to. We're now in the culmination of this occult religion. What they believe is the final climax, where they're trying to take us. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's this idea that we can somehow create heaven here on earth through our own works. The joke, however, is that God himself has a greater reset that is coming when he returns to put everything right. In Revelation chapter 9, as this entity gets out of the abyss with his cronies, the destroyer, Apollyon, Abaddon, the Bible tells us they get 5 months, and it will be 5 months only is how long his reign will last. I think that, there are those fallen angels, and we can only speculate as to what their minds are like. I have no clue. They are essentially inhuman entities. So trying to understand their thinking is a guess at best. Some of them probably understand that they're doomed and that they've got no hope.
And they're trying to take as many souls with them.
Exactly.
You want to explain that a little bit?
Sure. As they go,
it's a harvesting of souls, right?
Yeah. And as they go to destruction, they're going to try to take as many of us with them as possible. Oh, wow. And I think the end game is set up to try to deceive as many Christians and Jews especially as possible. My book, Bad Moon Rising, which is about the spiritual forces behind Islam, I believe that the deception coming in the end times will be specifically targeted at Jews and Christians to try to lead us into welcoming the Antichrist with open arms. But I think there are those who have the hubris to think that somehow they are going to make God a liar and somehow escape from the judgment that he proclaimed on him, which was back in Psalm 82. Psalm 82, if you've never read it, go and read it. It's startling. It's like a courtroom scene in heaven. God takes his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he passes judgment. He basically condemns these fallen angels for ruling unjustly. And then he says, though you are gods, all of you, sons of the Most High, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. God has decreed a sentence of death on the gods, and we're just waiting for sentence to be carried out.
So let me ask you this, when you go look back on the occult religion and their rituals, and then you see something like the Travis Scott concert, you see the mass shooting at the country concert that was in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Are those rituals used to bring forth a harvesting of souls?
It's hard to say. Because a friend of ours who's a Bible scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser, has, and he's also a respected ufologist, and he's done a lot of research into that area. And one of the things that we've looked at is the so-called Babylon working of L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons in 1947, which was to bring
Scientology, right?
Yes. But they were both followers of Aleister Crowley, and they were trying to bring forth the Scarlet Woman, the woman in scarlet, Mystery Babylon. And Mike made a really good observation. If these entities are so lame that they have to wait for a couple of perverts to perform sex rituals in the desert to manifest in our time-space domain, they're not really that much to worry about. I think the point is they get their followers to do these things to as a way of granting them permission. It's like the stories of the vampires. You know, you've got to invite the vampire into the house before he can enter. You know, that's really where the gates of hell are. It's like in here, you know.
Mhm.
You can read the telephone directory, but if you are doing it with the intention of summoning something from the netherworld, something's going to answer.
Right. So intention really is everything. Intention.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't think there are specific rites and practices that we can do that will necessarily compel these fallen entities to do things against their will. I think these so-called ceremonial magicians who are doing all these rituals and rites to control these entities, I think they're idiots. They're fools. Why would
they're fools that have fallen into the spell? But what you're saying, the bottom line here is that these entities, these demons, know that it's their demise, and what they're trying to do is take as many as of us with them in the last, which is now the last days, right?
Right. I don't think these entities are gaining in power, but I think what's happening is more people, more of us humans are aligning with them. So they've got more minions, if you will, more agents acting in the natural realm than there used to be in the past. You go back to the time of the first century, the early church, the first 4 centuries, they understood what they were looking at. Yeah, these gods of the pagans, Zeus and all of them, they're real, but they're fallen angels. One of the things that really startled us when we wrote the book Giants, Gods, and Dragons, Apollo in the ancient world was considered the god of oracles, and the Roman emperors would send representatives to the various oracles to find out, is it a good time to invade Parthia now or whatever. In the 3rd century, 2nd and 3rd century AD, as the faith in Jesus Christ spread around the Mediterranean Sea, the world of Rome, the oracles began to fall silent one by one. The most intense persecution of Christians ever in the late 3rd century under Diocletian and Galerius was because an oracle said the righteous men, meaning Christians, were interfering with the signal, essentially. This is documented history. And the early church understood what was going on. This is a spiritual war, and these fallen angels who rebelled against their creator are who the pagans are worshiping, these fallen angels and demons. In the modern world, we think all of this was just made up. And so we de-supernaturalize the Bible to the point where Jesus is just sort of
made it sound like it was a fairy tale.
Yes, exactly. But when you start
that's what blows my mind is that's really, even when I fell away from the Bible, I got to admit, I was like, it's an old book written thousands of years ago. I don't really believe in that. And now I've come full circle to where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's real. This is like 100% legit. It's happening right now. We are in the spiritual war. How do you feel about the rapture, Jesus coming back? How does that fit into all of this with what you're talking about?
Well, this happens prior to the final 7-year Great Tribulation period. Now, I know that there are some really well-studied people who would disagree. They put the rapture in the middle of that 7-year period. There are some friends of mine who put it at the end. Regardless of when it happens, it's going to happen. And even if we're here during that 5-month period when Saturn, 𝗫𝗄𝗃, Apollyon, you know, same entity, different names, when they get out and they're tormenting humanity to the point that those who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads are longing for death, seeking death, but death will flee from them. If we're still here because we're sealed through faith in Jesus Christ, we won't be touched. We'll be like Noah on the ark, Noah and his family, you know, sailing through that tribulation. So I think that's the final stage in this war. And then that culminates with the battle that is called Armageddon, which is this war that culminates for God's holy mountain. It's a popular misconception that this is fought at Megiddo because the name sounds like Armageddon. It must be Megiddo. Without getting into the technical stuff, when you transliterate from Hebrew into Greek and then back to English and then try to figure out what the original Hebrew was, Hebrew has some sounds and letters that don't correspond to anything in Greek and English. The actual phrase is 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃, which means Mount of Assembly or Mount of the Congregation. That's referenced in Isaiah 14, which is that chapter that's, you know, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning. He wants to establish his Mount of Assembly in the far reaches of the north. The 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃, God's 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗃, is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. That's where Armageddon is going to be fought. And, you know, it's for all the marbles. The fallen realm want to establish their domain there. And again, that's why I think the Mount of Olives is so important, because Solomon put a temple to this character on the Mount of Olives, which is 200 feet higher than the Temple Mount. When you're on the Mount of Olives, you're looking across the Kidron Valley down on the Temple Mount, which opens to the east. So when you're in the temple, you look out, it's like, oh yeah, there's the Temple of Molech up there. It's just another name of this entity.
So where can people get the book?
It's available at all major bookstores, Amazon.com, available in paperback and Kindle. And
could you lift it up one last time to show people?
Sure, absolutely. And props to our cover artist, Jeffrey Martis, who does all the cover art for Defender Publishing and all my wife's novels as well. He is a genius. This is brilliant stuff.
No, that's amazing. That's a beautiful book. I'm going to get it. Man, you're a wealth of knowledge. I'd love to have you on to go a little deeper on Nino's Corner.tv if you would like.
Anytime.
I'd really like to dive really deep into this. And I'm going to put this on FluffTube. I wanted something that can go on YouTube. So this is good. But if I can bring you back and we can dive deeper into this, that'd be awesome.
Anytime.
I appreciate you, Derek. Thank you very much. I'm going to premiere this tonight.
All right. Well, again, my honor. Love talking about this stuff. So anytime you want me back, just
got it. And I'll keep in touch with you, sir.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.